This is the Power Break Podcast number 096, titled A Passage Out of the Pit. Hi, I'm Bob Brubaker along with JT as we hope you'll stay tuned as we seek to give you a little power in this break to help you succeed in the race of life.
This is the Power Break Podcast with a focus on the spiritual, the mental, and the physical aspects, all to help you succeed in the race of life. For show notes from today's podcast, go to bobbrubaker.com and follow the link for the Power Break Podcast. Big Bad Bob, what's going on, buddy?
Well, just big and bad here. Well, so we both swam this morning.
We did, yeah. We both have that wind-blown, beach-blown look to us. Yeah.
Actually, you swam in a pool, and I swam at the Gulf of Mexico this morning.
Oh, that's pretty. How was that?
It was good. Of course, you really don't have to enforce the social distancing in the water because everybody's spread out.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there were so many people swimming, but you weren't even... I guess the closest I got to a person was about 15 meters away.
Oh, wow.
So,
yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. But it was pretty out there. It was a beautiful day. Jan walks the beach while I swim. And
that's great. That's perfect.
And since I would, have an orange cap on and I pull one of those buoys behind you that's tethered and so that you can be seen.
Oh,
so
yeah.
She can keep track of me.
Get your orange cap on? It's like you're going hunting out there. It's nice.
Yeah, hopefully
hopefully
Mr. Shark is not going hunting.
Well, let's hope he doesn't like orange.
Yeah. How about you? You had a workout with your son?
Yeah, so basically Christian woke up and said, "Hey, Dad, I'm going to take a break from schoolwork and swim some laps. You in?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it." So we went out there and, jumped in the nice cold water because it's really not that warm yet. But, It was great. It was refreshing, man. Now I feel wide awake and stretched out, and swimming's just good, man.
Yeah, it's good for you.
Yeah.
Well, before we take off on this program today, let's just thank our listeners for doing a great job at helping to spread the word about the Power Break Podcast and for leaving us ratings and reviews wherever you download the podcast. It really does help. We appreciate it very much.
Yeah, it's like I continue to look at the numbers and I continue to scratch my head, try to figure out why anybody wants to listen to you and I rant in masks. But
come on, we don't rant. Come on,
no, you keep me organized. Yeah. That's your job. I always say I'm the eye candy. You're the brains of the operation.
One of these days, we're going to set up that camera that'll record here. We'll do the Power Break Podcast video version. In the meantime, I've got a question for you, JT.
What is it?
Have you ever found yourself in the pit of life?
Multiple times, yeah. There's been times in my Christian walk where I have just flat out asked God, why do I feel like you've forsaken me completely? So yeah, the answer is certainly yes. I don't believe that there's anybody walking this planet that's honest with themselves that isn't going to tell you they've been in the pit of life at some point.
Exactly.
Right?
And so many times Christians act like that's not supposed to happen, and so they don't want to admit to it.
Yeah, you can't be, one of the things that I've loved about my small group is my friend Dean always refers to it as we always keep it real in there. But, doing life together is not showing somebody what you think they want to see. It's showing somebody who you are and how you struggle, because you're always going to find out that they struggle with the same stuff. We're all built the same way because we were all built by the same creator. So, there's been times where I've just walked in. There's actually a podcast, not a podcast, it's on Right Now Media. It's a video series. It's a teaching series. And this is a pastor, the woman who wrote it, who's been a pastor for a long time. And basically what she said was this. She's like, about 3 years ago, and this was right at the height of when she was putting out a lot of her educational videos and stuff like that. And when she started to really, quote unquote, succeed as a pastor, she said, I started to question my faith. And there's been times, where worship's going great, church is going great, and out of nowhere, man, I'm questioning, what am I doing?
So
Where's this going?
You've been in the pit.
I have been.
What do you do when you're in the pit?
Man, you get back to basics. You hit the reset button.
There you go. I was waiting for that.
Yeah,
that's the JT term.
Man.
Just hit the reset button.
That's it. Where did it all begin? Reading the Word of God and having him reveal himself to you. That's where it all began for me. How about you? You ever been in the pit?
Yeah, I've been in the pit multiple times in my ministerial life. Some of the times have been through times of rejection, and some of the times when I have to admit that I was seeking to be a people pleaser. It's so easy to do as a pastor. And what do you do in the pit? I like your phrase. It's a time of reset. It's time to. The only way out of it is to go back to the basics and just go back to reach out to God and to seek Him and pray that God would give you the grace to recognize some of the things that are causing your dismay in life. That maybe it could be some of the idols in life that we have been trusting rather than God.
Oh, for me, I'm glad you brought that up, because for me, it's almost always that. I got lost in an idol, whether it be my pride. At work, that's a tough thing for me, because, I was one of those guys that, people are people, and we all end up doing the same thing if we're not trying to do something different as God tells us to do. And, at my work, there was the winning team and the losing team. So, I was on the 2 chiefs ago winning team. Well, nobody liked him because he was an outside chief. As far as the good old boy network at my work, the people that were born and raised Largo people. Mm-hmm. So next thing you know, man, as soon as he was gone, I didn't realize it. I was really successful under him, but all those people were waiting for him to leave to just get rid of his people. Well, that was just the way it worked. So my success was not going to happen under the new chief, because there was a lot of resentment for the old chief, who was very successful. But I was one of his people. He was really into, if you work really hard for me, I will reward you. This new chief is, if you're my friend, and I'll reward you.
It happens, doesn't it?
Well, I wasn't his friend, so I didn't get rewarded. But at the end of the day, that's an idol for me.
Sure it is.
Success in my career is an idol for me. And that will be the thing that will occupy my mind over and over again and turn into resentment because I didn't get what I wanted at work. So,
actually, this whole article that we're considering today is from my studies and preparation for and delivering the messages through the Book of Lamentations. Oh. And as we talk about the subject today is from the 3rd chapter, and I'm getting ready to preach this next weekend on the 4th chapter. And the 4th chapter is actually an exposure of the various idols that the people of Judah and Jerusalem were trusting in. And those idols were taken away, you find that their dismay even increased. And so kind of a listing there. But the whole point today is about finding the pit in life, finding yourself there, because nobody is exempt, as you said, JT, from the pit of life. And times when you feel like everything is closing in on you and you seem to be without hope, kind of like what it says in Psalm 38 when he says, I am utterly bowed down and prostrate all the day. I go about mourning. My sides are filled with burning, and there is no soundness in my flesh. I'm feeble and I'm crushed, and I groan because of the turmoil of my heart, or the tumult of my heart. But you, O Lord, for you, O Lord, do I wait? It is you, O Lord, who will answer. And that's, of course, what we're going to find from the Book of Lamentations, chapter 3. So that's what we're talking about today.
So awesome, man. Let's continue to talk about that as we turn to your blog. Folks, if you haven't been to BobBrubaker.com, Bob does an article that you can sign up to get in your email every single week. This one's titled A Passage Out of the Pit, so that's why we're talking about it today. But there are so many fantastic resources at BobBrubaker.com. I would really encourage you guys to go there, check it out. Like I said, the prices are fantastic if you end up buying a book just simply because we don't make anything out of it. Bob doesn't make anything out of it. It's all about that's what it costs.
I can't even pay JT to be part of this podcast.
I've been meaning to talk to you about that. I want a raise.
We'll double your
double my salary. I hear that on the worship team all the time. Something, you did great today. I'm going to double your salary. So, let's continue to talk about that because it's so important, because I think with COVID, a lot of people are finding themselves in a pit right now. Yeah, so I think it's important for us to really be encouraging.
Well, we've all been there. This, matter of fact, the passage or the blog is titled A Passage Out of the Pit, like our podcast today. And I said on the article that we've all been there, what seemed to be a pit in life. Maybe things were not as bad as they appeared, but the way our minds play up things, or in this case, down things, downward spiral, the toughness of our situation can go from bad to worse. Recently, my series that I've been preaching through the book of Lamentations, I cover the 3rd chapter in which Jeremiah presents a description of the pit he found himself with which he concluded that all peace, prosperity, strength, and hope were long gone. Sounds pretty bad, doesn't it?
It does not sound good, no.
So listen to some of the words that he uses. He says, I am the man who has seen affliction under the rod of his wrath. He has driven and brought me into darkness without light. Surely against me he turns his hand again and again the whole day long. He has made my flesh and my skin waste away. He has broken my bones. He has besieged and enveloped me with bitterness and tribulation. He has made me dwell in darkness like the dead of long ago. He's walled me up so that I cannot escape. He has made my chains heavy. Wow. He describes the fact he felt like God was a bear lying in wait or a lion in hiding. He says he drove into my kidneys the arrows of his quiver, and I've become like a laughingstock to all peoples. He filled me with bitterness and has sated me with wormwood. He has made my teeth grind on gravel and made me cower in ashes. And then he says, my soul is bereft of peace. I've forgotten what happiness is. So my endurance has perished, and so has my hope from the Lord.
Oh, man.
You think he's in a bad situation.
You think? Yeah.
You think? Yeah. Of course, the first 2 chapters, Jeremiah kind of becomes the spokesman for the people of Jerusalem and Judah. And then in the 3rd chapter, it's almost like he draws them in to say, let me share with you my experience and how I feel, and let's see if this matches you. So it's actually a great technique of a minister.
Yeah.
That a minister identifies with his people so much that he can almost speak on behalf of his people. He knows how they feel. Yeah. But also then he lets them experience how he feels so they know that he's one of them. Yeah. That's a great technique. Anyway, we have to remember that this is a biblical lament of which you'll find 4 important elements in this grief processing mechanism that God has given to us in His Scripture. The 4 important elements are to take grief filled with complaining to a life-changing and life-building experience. So included are a respectful addressing of God as you call out to Him, a brutally honest and descriptive complaint, some specific requests, and a word of trust or praise. That from the Psalms of lament, and you'll find, of course, the book of Lamentations is a lament.
Yep.
Actually, 5 poems that are put together in a specific way that Jeremiah is teaching from that. We all know it's easy to spew out complaints when we're in the pit.
Oh, of course it is. Yeah. I think that's our automatic reaction.
Yeah, people do that all the time. In fact, it could be said that it's our favorite pastime.
Oh, you're not lying. Grumbling.
Yeah, like the old saying goes, if you want to get people agreeing with you, just start complaining about something. You're bound to get people.
You are not lying.
Yeah, get on the elevator or whatever and say, the weather's terrible today. Yeah, and I don't think so.
Yeah. We were talking about that the other day, my aunt and I, and it's funny because, people just, the mask thing is becoming an issue. There's a lot of people who would say, you can't make me wear a mask. And you know something? I get why you get that, or why you have that feeling, because you're an American and we're really into liberty and all that stuff. But man, what kind of a selfish turd are you that you're like, I'm going to exercise my freedom despite how badly it's going to affect other people? Because if you're that guy running around with coronavirus and you don't wear a mask and you give it to other people and they end up dying, that's on you, dude.
Yeah.
I hate to be that guy to bring that up, but man, it's frustrating. But it's because of we're grumbling about society trying to keep us healthy.
Yeah.
How dare the governor trying to make me healthy by making me wear a mask? It's like, you're going to grumble about that, of all things? There's so many other things to grumble.
There's always something to grumble about. Just look how many times the children of Israel grumbled and complained about one thing after another, and each time God's anger was stirred. The bottom line is don't complain.
There it is. That's
you might say, well, my situation is really bad. I don't think holding in my grief is going to work. I guarantee it won't. Matter of fact, it'll just make you very bitter. Lamentations chapter 3, then he works into verse 19. Here's how it goes. Remember my affliction and my wanderings, the wormwood and the gall. My soul continually remembers it and is bowed down within me. But this I recall to mind, and therefore I have hope. So first he remembered where he was with what he was experiencing. How could he forget? Because sometimes we forget the situation when we are in the pit, but there's no point in doing that. We can't just forget it. It plays over and over in our minds. Well, secondly, he rejected the situation. No, I don't like it. Okay?
And that's okay.
That's good. That's good.
Okay. Yeah.
The third, though, he changed his focus. That's where you change the channel on this, or as JT says, hit the reset button.
The reset button, baby.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And he changed the focus from what he was thinking upon as he recalled things he knew about God and began to live with expectation or hope. It sounds surprisingly good. So what did he put his mind on? Verses 22 through 24. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They're new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I will hope in him.
So awesome.
Steadfast love of the Lord, these unconditional covenant love. The mercies are blessings of the Lord that go on and on. In fact, they're fresh every day. Mm-hmm. And the faithfulness of the Lord, which is beyond measure. So he's teaching us how to lament.
He is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Being real in verses 1 through 18. Transitioning then in verses 19 through 21. And then from 22 through 24, he gives us the real proper focus.
Yeah.
Take your eyes off what you experience. It's not to downplay that.
No, it is not. But it is a choice.
It is a choice.
Yep.
Okay. So anyway, that's what we said. That seems to be what we're calling here the passage out of the pit.
Yep. That's good stuff, man. So good.
You'll find it at bobbrubaker.com. Check it out. It's the Power Break article, the Power Break blog there.
All right. So what else is going on, man? Any news?
Well, I thought it appropriate, since we're talking about this, to talk about the book that I wrote called The Power in the Valley. Now, The Power in the Valley was a book that was a collection of, first of all, sermons that I had researched and been preaching. I began with the Valley of Achor. Wow, this is almost 30-some years ago. I was in the pit, and I was looking for hope for myself and encouragement, and so I was searching the Word of God, and I came across this verse in Hosea chapter 2, verse 15, when it says that God says He'll give the Valley of Achor, which is the valley of affliction, for a doorway of hope. As I searched that out and began to develop a message around that, it was a message of hope to God's people, because we find ourselves in the valley of affliction many times.
Yeah, of course.
And we don't think about it. That is exactly what God says is a doorway of hope.
Wow.
So I built on that, and next thing you know, I found myself saying, I wonder what other valleys there are. And so I studied and found the different valleys in the Old Testament, their names and the circumstances and what God was teaching in those valleys. I thought, wow, there's a pretty good collection here. And so as I massaged them a little bit and make into different articles, I actually wrote several different little pamphlet books on those things. And then a friend of mine said, why don't you publish a book? Just collect all those things you put in different books.
Perfect, yeah.
And call it one thing. And I said, okay. And so I worked on that. Out of that came The Power in the Valley. And anyway, that's available on my website, bobbrubaker.com. You go to the resource, click on the resources, scroll down to where it says books, click on that, scroll through the books, and you'll find the book called The Power in the Valley. And while you're at bobbrubaker.com, check out the sermon links to the sermons that I preach. As I mentioned, the article that I've just mentioned, Passage Out of the Pit, is taken from one of the sermons that I preached from Lamentations chapter 3, and this coming Sunday will be Lamentations chapter 4. We're going through a chapter each week because each one is a separate poem collected together under the book of Lamentations. Actually, it's interesting, meant to be sung.
It is interesting. Yeah, that is interesting.
I think we would have a hard time singing it in English, but in Hebrew it made sense. It is also each verse in chapters 1, 2, and 4. Each verse is in an acrostic layout where each beginning of the first letter of the words follow the Hebrew alphabet. That's why there are 22 verses in chapters 1, 2, 4, and 5. And in chapter 3 is a series of triplets of 3 verses. And so they all begin with the same letter in Hebrew.
Oh, wow.
But again, it's 22 sections, but there happen to be 3 verses each, so that's why there's 66 verses in chapter 3.
That's amazing, man. I didn't know any
And the
of that.
whole layout is it kind of goes, it starts out in the pit and then works up to the pinnacle in chapter 3, verses 20, 21, 22, and 23, and 24, that seems to be the pinnacle, and then it works its way back down in chapters 4 and chapter 5.
Oh,
So that's a Hebraic way of writing that the central point is not at the end, but the central point is in the middle.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's interesting to see how much work that Jeremiah put into writing the book of Lamentations. Anyway, the series of messages, along with other sermons I preach here at Christ Community Presbyterian Church in Clearwater, you'll find links to that at bobbrubaker.com.
So that just to add something to that, so I never knew that you were really kind of in the Valley of Achor when you wrote about the Valley of Achor.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, man, that's really... So you were writing with the same perspective as Jeremiah, right?
I was looking for help for myself, and it's interesting because that was my... As a matter of fact, that was my first experience as a pastor. I was at a church just a short time and realized that people didn't want to hear the Word of God.
Yeah, that's a problem at a church, yeah.
They gave me all that impression when they called me as their pastor, and I was there, and they really wanted me to water down what I was saying. And when I refused to do that, they tried all kinds of tricks, including holding back my salary, and just tried to make me conform to them. And so I was in the midst of a valley because I realized, I'd left everything to serve the Lord, and we were there. And we found ourselves in a deep, dark valley. And we said, what are we going to do? We felt like we were friendless and friendly.
Wow.
Yeah, and anyway, God saw us through. And one of the ways he saw us through was ministering God's word. And he used that time of affliction to develop that interest in valleys. And really, it made, Spurgeon said, if you preach to someone that is hurting, you're preaching to someone in every row.
Oh, wow.
And
that's awesome.
So that became a theme of mine, and I guess God used it to minister to many people. So, matter of fact, when I wrote the first book based on that sermon called The Valley of Achor, I didn't sell those books. I just gave them away. And I can't tell you how many thousands of booklets I gave away just because people wanted it.
Wow. Yeah.
And then I would hear somebody, hey, I've got I got a copy of that from somebody. Can you send a couple to me? And then next thing...
Wow, yeah. And then it actually became, yeah. Well, something, it's true. When you're honest about your feelings, and they're human in nature, man, it's, that's going to strike a chord with people. I just think it's interesting that you were writing about it from that place.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
All right, so here we go. It's time for What About This? That is the time on the podcast for questions and answers. If you have a question for me or Bob, you can send that by email to jt@bobbrubaker.com. That's jt@bobbrubaker.com, and we'll get to answering that on an upcoming Power Break podcast. But for now, we are going to go right to question number 1.
That's appropriate.
I'm going to start at the beginning. How's that?
You're a man of integrity, JT.
Starting at the beginning. All right, so let's talk about a lament. A lot of people, when they read the Old Testament, a lot of times they're like, man, there was a lot of grumbling back there. Mm-hmm. So what's the difference between a lament and complaining? And let's talk about Jeremiah's turning from no hope to hope throughout the actual book of Lamentations. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, you're correct. A lament is different from a mere complaint, although a biblical lament includes a complaint.
Right.
Probably in more explicit terms than your common ordinary complaint. When we make a common ordinary complaint, we just say, I don't like this. Okay, now, the biblical lament, the complaint within a lament, goes into graphic terms.
Oh, I know David was awesome for those.
Yeah. And
rain down fire on my enemy.
Well, now that's imprecatory.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
right.
That's a request. And again, the request, like the complaint, is in graphic terms.
Yeah.
And so let's just talk about it. So first, there is In a lament, there is an addressing of God. And most of all, it's O Lord, which is actually his covenant name, Yahweh. And so there's a recognition of who he is, not just saying, "Oh Lord," like the old Southern term, Lord.
Oh Lord.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a recognition of who God is. Secondly, there is the complaint, and the complaint is just brutally honest. Here's how I'm feeling. Like Jeremiah said in Jeremiah chapter 3, I feel like God is crushing my teeth with stones. It feels like he's knocking out my liver. Okay, so then there's the third aspect, and that's the specific request. And some of those requests are, I would like to have this person done away with.
Yeah.
This caused me this trouble.
Yeah.
Now, Psalm 69 is a psalm of lament, and one of my members of the church asked me a question about David asked that this person's name be removed from the book of life.
Wow.
That sounds very serious, doesn't it?
Very serious.
Basically, David is asking God to send him to hell.
Yep.
Okay. Understand, before we criticize David for that, we've felt like that.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
If you're going to come in front of me and tell me that you haven't felt like that, I would say that you are not telling the truth.
Yeah, or you've not driven on US 19 here.
That's right. Even my kids at 8 and 10 would probably be able to tell you they felt like that.
Okay, so brutally honest in the complaint, brutally honest in your request, but there's also included a word of trust,
yes,
and or praise to God.
Yes.
So you recognize his sovereignty, that he's the one that's in control and you're not. So that makes this complaint totally different than a lament. A lament includes those four elements. Okay, let's talk about Jeremiah in Jeremiah 3. He does say he remembers his afflictions, his wanderings, the wormwood and the gall, etc. He remembered where he was and what he was experiencing. But he also rejected that situation. He wanted more. And so he changed his focus from what he thought was thinking upon and recalled to what he knew about God. He put his mind on the steadfast love of the Lord, his unconditional love that never ends, his mercies, his blessings go on and on, they're fresh every day, and the faithfulness of God. Now, where do you find those? Where do you find that aspect of God?
Oh, man, you can find that all around you. All you have to do really is look.
Okay, you see it in the power of creation. Where in specific, though, has God revealed those things?
Always in the Word.
In the Word.
Yep.
Okay.
Always in the Word.
Always in the Word. Just when you think about it, mercy is new every morning. It's like in Psalm 68 and verse 19 where he says, he daily loads us with benefits.
Right.
So, there you go.
Up to and including all the stuff that we take for granted. When you think about logically what has to happen every day for you to roll out of bed, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Like your brain had to send a signal to you to wake up. You had to roll physically out of bed. You had to be able to breathe during the entire thing.
Yeah.
You had to physically have the strength to get yourself up and out of bed. Go to the bathroom, because everybody goes to the bathroom as soon as they wake up, right? But you can go through that whole thing, and you can be like, man, think about a lot of people that don't have those things, right?
Right.
And then start to think about the rest of the stuff that
or think about it this way. There's enough sin in every one of our lives that God would be perfectly just if he was not a covenant-keeping God. Okay, that to send us to hell immediately.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, there's enough sin in our lives. And so when we stop and think about that, that's when his steadfast love of the Lord, I'm going to think on that. Or, the mercy of the Lord, and by his mercy we're not consumed, another translation says there. So the point is, in Jeremiah's Lamentations, he was brutally honest.
Yeah.
Okay, in his complaint. But he recognized the steadfast love of the Lord, his mercies, and his faithfulness.
Yep.
Changed his perspective altogether.
And we, in general, get stuck right before the recognition of the Lord and the trust part.
Yeah.
That's where we get stuck as a society in general, which is why we tend to be complaining and not really moving past
That's one of the reasons we need the Word of God, and we need prayer, we need fellowship with other Christians, and we need the preaching of the Word to get us out of that pit.
Yep.
Look, here is the God of the Bible. Or as it says, as we read in the Old Testament, that of things. There's a text of Scripture in Romans chapter 15 and verse 4. He says, the things written aforetime were written for our learning, that we through the patience and the comfort of the Scriptures, we might have hope. In other words, when we read those Old Testament accounts, even of the accounts of people that have failed or were down in the pit, and then God brought them out, that should encourage us.
Yeah.
God is the same God. He doesn't change.
Yep. So let's go to question number 2. So what are some mental strategies that we can use and we can apply to our time in the pit? Because we're all going to end up there. We've already talked about that. So what are some of the mental strategies for us?
Verses 19 through 21 I think would be a great one. You can apply it mentally, and of course it affects you spiritually, but remember, reject, and recall. Those 3 things. When Jeremiah remembered his affliction and his wanderings.
Yep.
Okay, recognize, do not downplay the situation you're in. Sometimes people will do that to you. Oh, JT, it's not so bad.
And it's really insulting when people do that. It is. It breaks your heart, and it makes you not want to listen to them after that.
Exactly.
Which makes it really ineffective.
Exactly, because everything they say after that point is not you're not listening to them because they've
judged,
downplayed your feelings.
Yep.
Okay. Unfortunately, that's how some parents treat their children. That's not so bad. Don't feel bad. Wait a minute. I do. I heard this old preacher talk about. He heard of another preacher who was dealing with a son who was heartbroken because his girlfriend gave him the heave ho.
Oh, boy.
Okay. And the son came home and he's talking to his dad, and his dad said, it's just puppy love. Okay.
Oof,
and this old preacher that was describing this other preacher, he said, it may be just puppy love, but it was real to the puppy.
Yeah, that's exactly right. My grandmother, I got a grandmother saying for that. My grandmother used to say,
Granny.
There's plenty of trains on the track, my friend. Don't worry about missing that one. She used to say that all the time.
But see, to downplay it takes away from your feelings.
It did, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. So he remembered. In other words, these are real feelings. Number 2, reject. Yeah, okay, I don't like how I feel. But 3rd, focus on what you know is true.
Yeah.
Philippians chapter 4. Focus on what is true and honest and good report.
Strange.
Yep, it connects, doesn't it?
Yep, it always does. The remember part is something we don't have a problem with. The reject part is something that we have a little bit of a problem with. And then we don't recall.
Yeah.
It's just so we are in such... We got it half right, but we got the bad part right, right?
Oh, there's old preachers. People around here at Christ Community Church make fun of me all the time because I'm always talking about these old preachers. But I've associated with a lot of preachers through my day. Okay.
Oh yeah, of course,
and
man.
Preached in many meetings with other preachers and all. And there was this old preacher that used to say this. He went to visit this lady and said, ask her how she was doing. And she goes, "Well, okay, under the circumstances." And you know what his answer was?
What was that?
"What are you doing under there?"
That's even funnier. I love that.
Yeah.
There's this line in a movie, and boy, this is a rabbit hole. The movie's called The Departed, and there's a part where Jack Nicholson, who is like the bad guy, walks in to a bar and he sees a guy that he knows. He says, "Hey, Jimmy, how you doing?" And he goes, "How's your mother?" He goes, "Oh, she's dying." He goes, "Aren't we all? Act accordingly."
Oh.
And that was kind of his response, like, yeah, okay, we're all dying. Just deal with it.
Let's see. Where's the empathy in that? We're not recommending that, folks.
No, we're not. But it is a great movie if you haven't seen The Departed.
But yeah,
anyway.
So remember, reject, and then recall. And sometimes you need to have little things to recall to make sure that you're right on target, too.
Yeah.
Little reminders.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's turn to the physical aspect of life. Let's talk about the times that we've all been in the pit physically. Ooh. I would actually say that I've been in a pit physically for a while now, just simply because, you don't really realize how much stress certain things put on your life, whether it be kids or job or whatever. Mm-hmm. And physically, man, I used to be a dynamo. Now I'm not, half the man I used to be or whatever you want to call it. But I think we've all been there. Maybe, it's an injury or life happens is the thing for me and you can't work out. When your training's gone down the tubes, what do we do?
I think applying those 3 words from Jeremiah really apply to physical too. Remember, take an honest assessment where you are.
Yeah, it's big.
You know, and sometimes that means testing. Sometimes you think you're there, and just go out and do a little test on your bicycle or running or whatever.
Yeah, and you're like, whoa.
Or one day you were able to do 50 push-ups, no problem, and today 10, you know, so okay, take it. And then reject means you hate the situation, not yourself, but you hate the situation enough to change you, to get motivated to make a change. Yep. And then to recall means that you look for methods or coaches or just a place of hope that would help you, maybe a different action plan, and you get in and take the baby steps to getting back.
Yep.
And you may not get back to where you were, but you'll sure be a whole lot better than what you are.
Well, that's just it, you know, and be realistic about your time. You know, a lot of times what happens is you see how bad things have become as far as, you know, your physical condition. Comparing it to, you know, when you're in your 20s isn't realistic for somebody like me or you. But
it was a long time ago.
Yeah, exactly. But you look back on that, and sometimes you tend to make an unrealistic plan, and it becomes stressful to work out, which isn't going to be helpful for you either.
Or you don't take the proper rest in there.
Yeah, exactly. And
so
you run yourself down. Yeah, you got to be patient. But like you say, and I know you're going to say it, discipline will make the difference on that. Just say, this is what I'm going to do.
And sometimes you get some outside source and a coach or whatever that helps you reset your expectations or goals.
Yeah.
Well, as we mentioned, it does take discipline to do that, and whether it be the physical, the mental, the spiritual, it takes discipline, and discipline does make the difference in all aspects of life. Check out today's show notes at BobBrubaker.com. Click on the Power Break podcast. Today is show number 096.
And submit your questions by email to jt@bobbrubaker.com and listen for Bob's answer on an upcoming Power Break podcast.
I think it appropriate before we take off today to mention the book, The Battle for the Mind. I think it's appropriate that we offer this book over and over during this COVID-19 situation because, let's face it, our minds are stressed. We're stressed because we hear different reports. We have reports that try to make us feel like we should get angry at some people or not trust other people. The whole point, folks, that the Lord is in control, and so we need to apply what the Scriptures teach us about what we think and how we think. And that's what the Battle for the Mind is all about. I just took the Scriptures and applied various Scriptures to applying to our mental state, what we think about and how we form our minds. Understand that God says that we're transformed by the renewing of our mind. So, The Battle for the Mind is found at BobBrubaker.com. Click on the resources, go down to the books, click on the book section, and scroll through the books. You'll find it. The Battle for the Mind at BobBrubaker.com.
Well, thank you for joining us for the Power Break podcast. Please subscribe and leave a review wherever you've downloaded the podcast. And check out show notes, news, Bob's weekly blog, and other cool things at BobBrubaker.com. And listen next time for the Power Break podcast.